Hello, I'm Peter Bell, and I'm here with Mr. Perry Little, CEO of Green River Gold Corp, CCR, and the TSX Venture. Hello, Perry.
Hello, Peter.
And I've got that wrong already. It's not the TSX Venture. You're on the CSE.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to point that out.
Thanks.
Yeah, we've got a sort of a unique take on mining and how to structure a mining company with regard to placer. I'm a former stockbroker, and I realized how difficult it is to put a placer mining company into a public company. There have been many attempts, and they never seem to work. And everybody just says you can't put placer into a public company. And there's a few reasons for it. It's a bit of a catch-22. The 43-101 rules are necessary and a good thing for the industry. But it's difficult to get a 43-101 report that's really going to tell you much about a placer deposit. I saw an estimate on one property when I first started looking at what it was going to cost to actually prove up what they figured they had on this one property was about $1 million. And frankly, if you had the $1 million, you'd just start doing a couple of trenches, and as soon as you found a good spot, you'd start mining.
Well, Perry, can I interrupt you for a second? Do you have any idea how many ounces they would have been able to put on the books for $1 million there? You know, like, is that 50,000 ounces, like $20 an ounce finding costs that they would have been able to book?
Yeah, we're going back about 4 years here when I was just doing investigating work, and I honestly can't remember how much that was. But the fact is, if you had the $1 million, you would have started mining it. I don't think if you had that much money, you would have started mining it rather than spend the money on a 43-101.
Yeah,
And
certainly.
it's just because that's the catch-22, is you have to have some proof of your resource in order to get financing, and most of these guys will never have the money to do that. So placer mining tends to be a small guy's game. Small person's game. There's not a lot of big money in the placer mining industry. It's a lot of small people who have difficulty raising capital. And so we looked at it and we thought, or I thought a couple of years ago, that maybe we can think of this a little differently. The costs of just getting started placer mining are pretty high, really. I mean, if you want to do anything of any significant scale, you're probably going to be out of pocket about $1 million by the time you pick up all the equipment. If you also have to purchase a claim and then do the bonding, which can cost quite a bit on a large project, it really does put you behind. So I came up with the idea of having the public company purchase claims, get them permitted, ready to go, and actually put up the bonding once we get an agreement with miners that we want to deal with. And we have all kinds of control over the way that the mining goes. We will be very careful to safeguard our bond, so we'll be in there to watch what they're doing. But they will be able to just come in and start mining. They don't have to deal with permitting issues. If there's logging that has to be done, we'll get that taken care of. So all of those things are done for them, and that cost is saved. And what we do is we charge them a rent, and the rent is based on 10% of what we expect they will recover from that project. And that's a bit of a negotiation situation, but that's no different than negotiating rent between a barber shop and a strip mall. You have to both be happy with what the rent's going to be, and we would collect that rent on a monthly basis at the beginning of the month. And we do get some benefits out of that. If you were to look at a large operation, a large placer operation on a placer claim, the claim may be on average about 20 hectares. If they run for a year with a fairly significant operation, something that's going to do the maximum that you can do, which is 20,000 cubic yards of pay dirt through your plant, if they do that, they're not really going to touch much of that 20 hectares. Maybe 5%, maybe 10% if at the maximum. So at the end of the season, we will still own the claim. we will have a pretty good idea what's there, and we still have 90% of the claim left over. So there's a significant advantage to us on this in that we're actually having somebody come in and do our exploration work for us, if you will, and give us an idea what that claim's worth. And there's very good odds that we would also own the surrounding claims. So it has an impact on the valuations of the entire claim group. So
Amazing.
I think it works, and it's something we're still testing out. We're in the early stages. We've got some people interested. We do have some permitted claims, and we should have some people up and running for this season. And
Okay.
we'll see if it works as well as we expect that it will. I do believe placer claims will go up in value over the next few years. We run, oddly enough, a small retail store in the north end of Quesnel, not far from where Highway 26, the famous Barkerville Highway, hooks onto Highway 97. We like to say it's the corner of gold mining and gold mining, but we opened a little store there, and the reason we did it is just trying to be frugal. We needed office space, and so we picked up office space right on the highway, and we thought it would increase our exposure as well, just when people drive by and see the sign and realize that we're permanent residents there. But we had an opportunity to pick up some retail stuff, and we were toying with this idea anyway. So we picked up a bunch of retail mining inventory, mining supplies inventory, and we picked up a couple of product lines on top of it. And so our admin person sits in the store, and we're surprised at the amount of things that we're selling out of there already. We're just into early May. There's still 2 feet of snow on some of the mining claims up there in the Caribou. I know our guys tried to drive into one of the claims the other day, and they couldn't get through. So it's still got to be a while before people start mining this year, and yet our store is already busy. And we never anticipated doing much more in there than covering the rent. That's all we were really trying to do, and give ourselves a reason to connect with the mining community. It's far busier than we expected. So I do really believe. Sorry.
Well, mining bull market fill your sales up really quick.
Yeah, it will, and it's a pleasant surprise. I mean, that's never going to be a big part of our business, but it's bigger than we thought it would be, and it really gives us a finger on the pulse of the mining activity. And what we're seeing is what we expected with the lockdowns going on, with so many people thrown out of work. We thought there may be a bit of a parallel, unfortunately, to the 1930s when the Caribou region had a mining boom. Everybody remembers the famous Caribou gold rush back in the late 1800s, but there was a resurgence in the 1930s. And we seem to be seeing the same thing. People thrown out of work are thinking, why don't I try this? So we're set up to equip them with everything they need for small hand mining. We've got starter kits that we sell out of the store with a pump and a high banker, which is sort of a portable sluice box, and the pans and the shovels and everything they need. We can equip somebody for about $1,700 to go out there and try the hand mining thing, get a feel for it. We also have a private company which manufactures larger equipment, and it's about 3 blocks back from where the store is. So that we sell trommels mostly, which are those big round drums that you see that they use for washing the gravel. To separate it from the gold, and we build those at a plant. So we can basically service the mining community, and we have multiple points of contact with them. And what that does is it gives us a bit of insight into what's happening up there, where the good claims may be, who we want to deal with. So we could put deals together, whether it's buying claims, selling claims. It keeps us in the game all the time.
And here you are in Edmonton.
Here I am in Edmonton. Not so much in the summer. I've been married for about 40 years. I've got 3 kids and 4 grandkids here, so this is very much my home. We've been in Edmonton for 40 years, as a matter of fact. But I kind of fell in love with the gold idea, the placer gold idea a few years ago. I'll go back to that story in a moment. So my wife puts up with me heading out there for several weeks at a time. Once the mining season starts, they don't need me out that much in the winter, but I'm on the phone with them consistently throughout the day. I don't know how many times, phone calls, emails, and texts during the course of the day. It's amazing what you can do from a remote location now, but we have great people on the ground. It's all local people from Quesnel. We went through the first period where you meet a lot of people that maybe you shouldn't deal with. We got to the point where we're dealing with good people. You mentioned that we were a fairly new company. It's not quite as new as you mentioned. We went out there placer mining ourselves in May of 2016. So this is the start of our own fifth year doing placer mining. And when I got out there and I realized the lack of services for the local miners, just trying to find a trommel for ourselves, we ended up way overpaying for a piece that was not wonderful. And we realized we could probably build better stuff ourselves. Rent out there is cheap by most standards, ridiculously cheap actually. So picking up a shop that we could do the building and also do service work for the other miners. So we'll have a service truck on the road here shortly. That's all through our private company, but that's sort of morphed into the retail end, and the retail end is all in the public company. So we build things through the private company that are marketed under the Green River Gold Corp name. I don't think we'll ever have Green River Gold actually get into the manufacturing. It's just a different thing altogether. We think it's easier to just keep that in the private company and use the familiar name to market the machines. So it's worked out well, and it gives having that shop, which again that's private company stuff, but it is an affiliated company. It is related to Green River. We have the ability to store things on there, to use the shop to fix equipment with. It's very much a handy sort of a deal. So Green River's got a launch pad and office space right in Quesnel. So it's driving distance. It's a quick daily commute if you want to out to our mine site. So we don't have to have guys. We're not paying for a lot of accommodations for people from out of town.
Yeah, well, amazing. There's so many aspects, things to discuss that you've mentioned here already, right? And maybe the one burning question for me is kind of for people looking at the stock, how much forward guidance can they expect to get from you in terms of any aspect of the business, right? You mentioned the 10% number as an interest in placer miners who are operating on your land. Right? What does that equate to? Do you have any ability to provide any, dollar figure amounts on what that might look like, or for the retail location, or even for this manufacturing business, is there any going forward guidance on the financials and the backward looking stuff too with the private company? Any information we can discuss on how much money's been put up in the past? And
well, the private company is really a different animal altogether, so I'd rather kind of stay away from that one. I will say that it's gaining traction on the manufacturing side. Our own personal mining experience with it has been a little hit and miss. We're getting better at it, and we realize just exactly how difficult it is because we're out there trying it. I spent the summer of 2017, virtually the entire summer, living in a well site bike trailer 3 kilometers from our mine site, and I was on the mine site every day trying to learn every aspect of the placer mining business. It was a learning curve for an ex-stockbroker, I'll tell you, but it was interesting. It was very informative, and without that, I don't think I'd be equipped to do what I'm doing. So I'm glad I got my hands dirty for a summer. I also dropped about 25 pounds in 6 weeks at one point. So yeah, it's a good workout running up and down those hills. I think that forward guidance is something we'll be able to provide in a while. Right now, it's difficult to do so. We are just in the process of getting deals nailed down. I'm quite certain we will have some here in the next little bit for this season. And I would hope at least 3, with the idea that over the summer and then over next winter, we will be getting a lot of our claims permitted, so that we'll have a much larger inventory to offer next season. So this is a scalable thing. This is our first year really rolling out this model. So just if you wanted a quick example, let's say that we've got an operation that we believe is capable of producing 100 ounces of gold, and both the operator and Green River agree that that's what it would be. We would take 10% of that, so we'd have our 10% of the estimated gold for the season, and at 2,400 Canadian, that'd be $24,000 worth of gold. We don't want the gold. We don't want a portion of the gold, because our experience with everybody that we've seen out there is that the gold doesn't show up. Whenever anybody gets a gold-based royalty, the gold seems to disappear before they get their cut. So I wouldn't believe in any company that was doing it that way, and I wouldn't expect any investor to believe in it. So we avoided that, and we thought, let's just take a cash-based rental, and it'd be based on that percentage. It'd be very much like a royalty, except that we get cash, so we don't care if the gold goes missing. We'd feel sorry for them if it went missing, but it's not going to impact us. And if they end up doing better than they expect, well, that benefits all to them. So in that case, if it was 24,000, and if they were going to be mining for 4 months, it'd be $6,000 a month rent that we get up front. Mm-hmm. And all that we have to do, we picked up the claim, we did the permitting, which is a little bit of cost, and we've cleared off any trees that might affect the mining operation, so that we get that done ahead of time. And then we put up the bonding. Now, the bonding can really range. It could be upwards of $100,000, but that comes back to you once the project is properly reclaimed. So it's not really an expense. It's a deposit, a refundable deposit, if you will. So as long as you clean it up, we've got a pretty good track record of cleaning up the properties that we work on, and we will make certain we do respect the land, and we will make certain that the operators play between the lines. So we could do rather well, actually, when you look at it. If it was 4 months rent on one property, $24,000, it doesn't sound like very much, but in a lot of cases, we're not paying very much for those claims. We can pick them up, do a little bit of testing on them, and make them more valuable just by doing that. And then at the end of one season, if you remember what I said, we still have 90 to 95% of the claim of the mineable area that's been unmined at that point, right?
Yeah.
So we've already recovered, in a lot of cases, our cost of the claim, mm-hmm. and the only other thing we've put up is the bond.
Wonderful. And one of the things that people love to criticize about placer is, it's got no runway, there's no mine life, it's highly uncertain, and there's not much reason to think that it, could be particularly long. That seems to be an attitude that I've encountered, but hearing you talk about the size and how, you're only getting through 10% of the land package of one of these claims in a season, there's reason to believe, you could go at it a few seasons if the miner can fund themselves and organize themselves to do the work. I would imagine juggling the bonds and all the permitting and everything for the small business operator might be, a little bit of a stretch in terms of their expertise, right? They may be good at moving dirt, but not so good at moving paperwork.
There are agents that will do the bonding and permitting, or not the bonding, but do the permitting for them. And there's some very good ones. Our mine manager, actually, we charge about $95 an hour to do permitting for other miners as well, so we'll take care of that. The permitting is not rocket science, but it's a little more involved than people realize. And if you mess something up, your permit goes back to the bottom of the pile again.
Yeah.
And I've seen people miss a year of mining simply because of glitches in the permitting.
Which is an unaffordable risk, really, for a private company that's trying to have that as its, as a going concern. If you miss a season in a situation like that, that's a big problem, right? So to smooth some of that out.
The number of times I talk to people and they say we're still waiting on permits, and so having a specialist help with the permit is not a bad idea, because they're less likely to make those errors that can slow you down. So Kyle is wonderful at doing that stuff. He knows the Mining Act inside and out, and we're very happy and very lucky to have him on side. So with the permitting, having that taken care of for people is wonderful. We also have contacts who can do any logging that needs to be done. The first year that we got into it, we had to do some logging on the property that we were mining. And that's a completely different permitting process, and I didn't know the rules on that at all. And it was rather intimidating, actually. And it's just something that's just one more nuisance. So if we know they want to mine a certain area and there's some trees that have to come off, that we've got contacts that can take care of that and get that all cleaned off for them. And if they want to do it themselves, they can, but not too many miners are also loggers.
Well, and this example you mentioned of doing, working 10% of the ground in a season, what's to say that how much of the ground is even, prospective for pay dirt, right? Like, is there a reason to believe that, in a representative case, 20%, 30%? Is it 60, 70% of the ground?
It's a very, I simplified it when I said 90 to 95%, because with most claims, there's only got to be some of the area that's really the higher grade area, where you believe there's got to be economic quantities of gold. So just because it's 20 hectares doesn't mean you've got 20 hectares of good paying areas. But most of the ones that we're picking up, that we're looking at, are going to have at least several years of mine life. That is something we look at, is the what looks like the mineable area. We wouldn't want to go through the hassle of something where it's only going to have a 1-year mine life on it. It's not the kind of thing that we bother permitting.
No,
we'd probably sell that to somebody if we got around to it. So.
Well, and it's this combination of quick payback, but also kind of being able to get a few years out of it. The placer stuff, you really get a quick return. You think about the returns associated with successful exploration work and the years and years and years it takes to advance something in an exploration perspective, and the valuations that you get on success. It's high stakes and a lot of cash burn up front.
I've invested in a lot of exploration companies over the years, and it is very much like a lottery ticket. You're not going to win very often. When you do win, you win big. And obviously, I've seen more flops than hits. Somebody mentioned the other day, it was kind of interesting, that what excited him about our company was our 82 square kilometers of mineral property, which I barely mentioned. He should be excited about it. I'm excited about it. contiguous with the Osisko Caribou project, which used to be Barkerville Gold Mines. Osisko bought them for, I think it was $335 million in the fall of 2019, so just last year. Our property, sometimes good timings, good timing does happen sometimes. Good luck's better than good planning. We negotiated for a long time on the property that we bought, the 8,200 square kilometers, well, bought and staked. Not 8,200 square kilometers, sorry, 8,200 hectares. And we purposely staked that particular area with the help of some local people who had a lot of experience mining. Some of them had done some time with Barkerville Gold Mines and had a pretty good idea of the geology up there. So we picked up those properties, and that's our lottery ticket. Okay, it's a great piece of property. We're right there. Our timing was wonderful because we picked it up at a price that I don't think we would get it today. We negotiated it when gold was 1750 Canadian, not 2400 Canadian. And we finished the deal, closed it in August of 2019. And it was 1 month later to the day that Osisko bought Barkerville Gold Mines for $335 million. So that kind of raised the value of the neighborhood. So we do believe we have a lottery ticket there with our, and quite possibly a winning one. We'll see. We'll be doing exploration work on there over the next few years to find out exactly what we've got, but we think we are in the right place. The thing about our company,
and that's the Fontaine, and that's the Fontaine.
That's the Fontaine project, yes, and we've got 680 hectares of placer sitting right on top of that. So we'll be up in that area quite a bit. When you look at our company, the way it's set up, it's a lot different than most junior exploration companies in that we aren't just a lottery ticket. We have that on the side, and that excites the heck out of us. But we have, I believe, a viable business model just on the placer end of things. And so I think it's sort of if it plays out right, it's kind of a lottery ticket where you're at least guaranteed the $10 prize. And probably more than $10. I think the placer will do rather well for us, actually. But it gives us a backup where, if we drill out there for a few years and for whatever reason, it doesn't come out to be what we expected, we've still got a company. We're still running. Yeah. And, that's something that I think separates us from the rest. In fact, I believe a couple of years down the road, we'll be able to fund our exploration programs largely from our own cash flow.
What a position to be in for a little junior.
I am excited about it. I really am. And it's unfortunate the circumstances that are leading to the increase in the gold price and, for that matter, the decrease in the energy price. But you can't get a better scenario for placer mining than $2,400 Canadian gold and cheap energy. That's one of the prime determinants of success in gold mining of all kinds, in placer mining in particular. One of your biggest costs is fuel. And when that cost is low, it's fabulous. But the ratio of the gold price, the Canadian dollar gold price, to the Canadian dollar energy price is a very important determinant of whether you can succeed at placer mining. And I don't believe it's ever been higher than it is today. Give or take a few days. That ratio is absolutely huge at this point. And sorry.
The history, as you mentioned too, with the Great Depression, right? The 1930s, the deflation that happened on the energy and the labor cost side, again, and to have people available right now, as you mentioned before, right? Like this is.
Yeah. With the federal government, actually back in the 30s, they actually had a grub stake program. They came up with partway through where they would take young men that were out of work in the cities, and they would put them in I think it was about a 6-week prospecting mining course. And then I think they give some massive amount of money, like $8.50 or something, to go out, and they gave them that as a grub stake and sent them out into the Caribou to do gold mining.
right? Literally in the Caribou, British Columbia, Canada, the
Exactly.
region where you're active today.
That's it. Yeah. So
100 years
it's
later.
funny, history doesn't repeat, but it sometimes rhymes. And what we're seeing here is very similar to the 30s in that the input costs went way down. The gold price went up considerably in the 30s. And if you look at the history of the 1930s, about the only companies that were really successful throughout the 30s were gold mining companies.
Yeah.
You hate to think this might play out like the 30s, but there certainly are some similarities, including the massive number of people who've been displaced from their jobs. And if this gives them an opportunity, that's great. We'll try to do a lot of the groundwork and have places ready for people that want to come up and try to set it up. We also have, a lot of claims that they could just come out and do hand mining on if they just want to come out and try it out. So we
Good
can
for
support
you.
them in that as well.
Good for you looking around the corner on that. It's important. And is it, so it's more than Fontaine too, right? Because Fontaine, you have the mineral claims and the placer claims, but you also have placer claims elsewhere. And
we do, yeah, and we continue to add to that, and we're pretty careful and selective in what we want to buy. As I mentioned, I don't want to buy something that's only got maybe a 1 year worth of mineable area on it. We try to find things that are going to be a little better than that. So we've got right now we're right around 2,000 hectares, 20,000 hectares of placer claims. That includes almost 700 in the middle of that Fontaine property. And we also have a group of claims on the Little Swift River and at Fontaine. On the Little Swift, I believe we have, I think it's 15 linear kilometers right along the river. And that's historically a pretty good river for mining. So yeah, we're excited about that.
But there's a fair amount of cover at Swift River too, right? Like it's not really deep paleo channels from what I understand, but there is some, some clay type stuff maybe, or some layers of cover, right? That you're going to want to get through. And then, the whole question of exploration for placer mining and all the prep that goes into that, kind of a season ahead stripping. Really in the Yukon, they expose the ground. They want to work kind of a year ahead, as I understand. Maybe a slightly different scenario here, a little bit milder conditions.
Yeah, we've got one property that is pretty much ready for mining on the Little Swift, and we have somebody who's quite interested in it right now. Whether a deal will come to fruition or not, I don't know, but that one's pretty much a turnkey, ready to go type of an operation, and I don't think that one's going to be a terribly difficult mining scenario. We've had a couple of our own that were very challenging. There was gold on them, but they were very challenging to try to mine just because of the location. I don't think this one on the Little Swift's going to be that difficult. But we do have all the claims on the Little Swift. It's all contiguous, and that's a huge advantage to us in terms of getting work done on the claims and being able to advance the good to dates.
Yep.
I always think in terms of trying to increase the value of the claims as well. And I think just an increasing gold price and more interest in mining out there will probably increase the value of those claims. But there's ways of adding value. Permitting, obviously, is one of them. But also moving forward the date that they're good to. And you have to do a little bit of work on each claim each year. It's not very much, but just to move the needle forward a year. If you do a lot of work, you move the needle forward several years. If they're contiguous, all owned by the same company, you can do a couple of larger programs, maybe do some trenching, or maybe even do some mining on part of it, and you can apply that work to the entire group. So you can move all of the claims in the group forward by several years and spread it out over the whole group. And that's huge, because if you get somebody who just wants to speculate in mining claims, and Lord, there are a lot of them, claim flippers, they would much rather buy a claim that doesn't expire until 2028 than one that's going to expire in 6 months.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's kind of like having an out of the money option. It's still got a time value, but the shorter that time gets, the less the time value is. So if we can extend the lives of all these things, right now, interestingly, everything's grandfathered. Everything in BC is safe till the end of 2021, and that is because of the virus. They basically just said some people won't be able to get out and do assessment work. So they've simply given a blanket, don't worry, your claim's not going to expire until December of 21, at least December of 21.
And I don't know if on the back channels, how much the AME BC Association of Mineral Exploration, I don't know how pivotal they were in making that happen, but I think they were involved in it. Good advocates there for the junior mining business in BC.
I was so happy when I heard it. It didn't really have a direct impact on us, but I know other people that would have been, really destroyed by it. It's a weird. It's a weird time to be working in any industry. We feel almost ghoulish in the sense that our industry is probably going to experience a boom coming out of this. I will tell you, though, the one thing that we've noticed, though, and the whole industry has, is I think probably every industry has, trying to raise money for projects in this environment is very difficult. People don't know if they're going to have a job, if their business is going to fail. People are holding on to their wallets. So raising money is not an easy process in this market. That's the only negative for the gold mining right now.
Well, and yet there's more money out there than ever before, right? It's just stuck on bank balance sheets and at the central bank, earning whatever margin on excess reserves. But at some point, that money might come out into the system in some ways. And, there are sophisticated players in markets who have access to some of that money already. And, one of the things with this public company that you have here too is the potential for some sidecar private investments. It's something I've seen in a few places here where, a public company has a project that's pretty impressive, but for whatever reason, Mr. Market can't get his head around funding it. And so rather than, doing all the heavy lifting themselves and bumping up against, whatever 20% lines in the sand on equity stakes in the public company, filing insiders, at some point it becomes simpler and easier to just create a workaround that has a private company, partner with the pubco on getting some work done. Seen that done with some drilling projects recently, and you guys, you offer that in spades. It's amazing.
Yeah, I guess we do. We see ourselves as a landlord, rather than a miner. Our private company does mining, so we understand the whole mining process, and we understand how difficult it is. We want to see people succeed, and we'd like to take some of the wrinkles out of it for them. So yeah, everything we do is sort of a public-private partnership, I guess, if you will. Even our neighbors. Here's a funny story, Peter. It was what got me hooked on placer mining was years ago. I can't remember what year they did the bulk sample, but our neighbors on the other side. We have Osisko on one side, and we have Amanika Mining, and I've known those guys for over a decade. I don't know how long, actually. But they have a big chunk of property just to the northwest of us. And again, we touch right onto their property. So we are contiguous with them, basically, on the other side. They've got that Wing Dam project, which is a really unusual underground alluvial project, very, very high grade, but technically extremely challenging. And they're going to go underground and try to freeze mine it. I know you're familiar with the project. It caught my attention years ago when I was a stockbroker. And part of the idea of doing the landlord thing was watching them trying to raise money for an underground alluvial deposit. It was extremely high grade, but you couldn't do a 43-101 report on it. So you couldn't raise money, and it was a real catch-22. And they found their way out of it, interestingly, with a partnership with a private company.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
But they had to wait. They waited a long time here, Perry, to get there.
yeah. The good thing is the gold doesn't go anywhere. It's still going to be down there. So it took them a long time to get there, and I'm glad for them. I hope this thing works out very, very well for them. But it was just another example of the public-private thing. But
It's
I
wonderful.
actually went out to see some work they were doing. They were shooting some downhole seismic, and that was years ago. And I started looking around, started doing the math in my head on placer mining, and that's where the idea originated, was from our neighbors. So yeah, thanks,
And
guys.
yeah, cheers, +1. Thanks to Omanika as well. Creating some more waves for the caribou, drawing more attention to it, and bringing miners from Saskatchewan who can, handle some of the ground freezing stuff, bring some of their knowledge and things like that within Canada. And you in Alberta, it's Western Canada is better together here. We all need to work together, I think, to unlock some of the value in the hiding in the caribou in the hills up there. It's not hard country to work, but it's not particularly, it's not easy either.
No, and it's one thing about Westerners. I think they're used to surviving some pretty tough elements, and
Yeah.
it's a hard-working, honest crew of people for the most part. And I think we can work together much better. I like the way you said that, actually. I think sometimes our politicians love to play for points by creating friction when most of the people are basically the same.
Well,
So,
and we're out here trying to pull, real money out of the ground of all things too. Imagine that, right? And you look at all the economic chaos out there, and you talk about being able to pull real wealth out of dirt. What? How does that work? It's
And it's a pretty environmentally friendly process too.
Yeah.
People think about gold mining and they think about some of the disasters that have happened with tailings ponds failing and whatever. If you ever look at what placer mining is, I mean, we dig the gravel out of the ground, we wash it, we sift the gold out of it, and we put the gravel back in the ground and put the topsoil back on. Nature reclaims things pretty darn quickly. If that's all you're doing is washing the gravel, you're really not harming anything. That's going to be a long-term harm. You do see guys occasionally abandoning equipment out in the bush and whatever, and that always ticks me off when you see that kind of thing. I hope at some point that they start awarding contracts to clean up some of the old placer mining sites.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just filling in holes for the most part and dragging, broken equipment off the sites. But I'd like to see that done, and that's something I think the government could create some jobs doing that. And we were hoping to get some work like that. I actually put the word green in the title of our company because we had a couple of ideas on environmental things. So there's a reason green went into the title.
Well done.
And we still hope to be able to do that. So.
And so again, this placer mining stuff is in there at this point, kind of to help defray overhead costs for the pubco. Is it fair to say, right? You're not raising enough money off of that to be able to do any drilling work.
Not right away, but we do believe this is a scalable process, and it also increases the value of our placer claims. So we're going to be continuing, if we can find good deals on good claims, we'll continue to add to our inventory of placer claims, and we will have quite a few more permitted and ready to go for next year. So there's no reason we can't scale this up to a point where there's a significant amount of revenue coming in from it. And the lottery ticket is still out there, right? So if we can stay away from having to come back to the capital markets as regularly as most junior explorers do, and at least fund a portion of our drilling program from our own pockets, it will save the endless dilution that seems to be a plague in the industry. And I mean, you've seen it over the years, I'm sure, where you're getting some good results, and you do a round of financing, and you do some drilling, and you get some more good drill results, and you're doing quite well, and now your price is going up, and then you just hit a slump in the gold price, and nobody wants a gold company, and suddenly you're back there cap in hand trying to raise money at 2 cents, and it's if we can avoid that. then I think we've got the perfect mix. And
Yeah.
I think people
Yeah.
might be surprised how much money can be made in placer mining in the next few years. I
Yeah.
do anticipate, I am a gold bug, and I do believe the gold price will go a lot higher. Placer is something where you can turn gold into cash very, very quickly. So
Yeah. Well, cash into gold, Perry.
cash into gold, yeah, even better. We actually had a little gold buying thing, and we flirted with doing that again, and we still may. We probably do it through our private company because it's a very weird business. I don't know how our auditors would figure it out, but we got a bit of exposure to it last year. Our private company did a little bit of gold buying, and people are bringing in their placer gold, and we were able to buy it locally and give them a check right away, which is a lot better than waiting 2 weeks for it to come back from a refiner. It was informative, I'll tell you. That's an interesting part of the business that we'll probably explore again. I don't know if that will ever fit into the public code, but again, never say never. I think I'd rather have an auditor stand there for 10 days watching it and decide whether there's something they could put an audit opinion on. It's difficult because when people bring in 20 ounces of placer gold, his brother could bring in the same bag of gold, and they could be worth quite a bit different depending on what creek they mined it on. One might be 90% pure, the other one only 82%. One guy may have claimed it or cleaned it very well, and the other one might look like a bag of mud with gold sparkles in it. So it would be pretty weird to explain to an auditor why you paid two totally different prices for two different bags of gold that came in. Yeah. And so anyway, I'm an ex-auditor, so I always think that way.
A shout out to International Gold and Metals, ICAU, a pubco that on the venture there that's doing that for small scale artisanal miners kind of around the world, and kind of helping them fight against the refiners who kind of, they get squished. I think they squeeze the margins on some of those artisanal, legal miners around the world pretty hard. So acting as an intermediary there apparently is the potential to be enough margin to have a pubco.
I think what we saw is there's definitely the ability to make money without having to rip off the local miners. Ideally, I think what we'd like to do is melt every batch comes in. That way you get sort of a standard purity. It'll come out about 95% pure once it's melted. You take out most of the impurities. Of course, you need a refinery to get it to the 0.999 stage, but at least we get a pretty good idea. It's a lot easier to agree on a price when you've got a sorry about that.
Okay.
I will try to shut that one down. There we go. I forgot I had my cell phone on. My apologies. I think there's room to work with the miners and to give them a good deal and still make a profit at it. And I will tell you that a lot of them are hand to mouth, and when they come in, they want a check today. And it's a rigmarole getting the stuff down to a refiner. The one most people use is down in Richmond, and it's how do you do it? You package it up at your own risk and send a bunch of gold off to them, and they haven't agreed to what the weight is yet. Or do you take 2 days out of your schedule and drive down? It's a short mining season. You don't want to be doing that too often.
No, certainly.
So having somebody in town that can do it is a huge benefit to everybody, and I believe there's enough of a margin in it to make it work. I don't think we'd ever get into buying gold watches or anything. I think that's a totally different business. We don't want to be a pawn shop, but yeah, we have toyed with the idea of getting back into the gold buying thing. We played with it last year.
It's just stunning that even in British Columbia, Canada, you can have these gaps in market coverage. You'd think that the intermediary gold buying function is a pretty basic part of a placer gold mining industry. And if the Caribou district in British Columbia doesn't have that well served in 2020, like how much opportunity is there to bring some capital into this environment, right?
Yep, and we think we're the perfect place to do it, since we've already got a shop that's supplying the big guys with equipment and doing service work for them, and a store that's handling the small guys. We had it was actually a refiner's agent that was in there sharing our rent with us last year, and we got to know he did all the big purchases, but the refinery really wasn't interested in 2 ounces of gold and having to run 2 ounces. So that's where we saw a gap, and we only toyed with it, but what we saw was promising, and we also realized that it's kind of an odd business, and so we'd have to find the right person to be able to come in and do it. We are investigating that still, whether that would end up in the public co or a joint venture of some sort. I don't know. I wouldn't rule it out, but it's not right on the front burner right now. Not especially not at the start of the placer season.
Another example of your finger on the pulse, right? And to have the CCR, Pubco with a 1.5, sub $2 million valuation Canadian here, right? And
Yep.
there's
I can't believe we're this cheap. We're trying to get the story out.
People don't understand.
Yeah, I tried to get the story out. It's a little bit of an odd story. I don't think anybody's tried being a landlord to the placer industry before, and having it probably looks odd that we're doing retail, but we really get to see what's going on. We meet most of the placer miners. I'm sure that this season will end up in that store at some point.
Yes.
We have the only sort of mining supply store that is really just dedicated to mining supplies and equipment between Prince George and Williams Lake, and that's a pretty good stretch. So all those guys mining at Barkerville were kind of the first stop, and we don't have a huge markup on things. We didn't get into it to gouge anybody. We kind of hope to make a bit of money at it and cover off some of our admin costs. That's really what we were looking for, and it's been surprisingly good. But again, it tells us how busy it's going to be out there, and that tells us something about the value of those mining claims. It's going to be hard to come by good mining claims soon. You can still stake the odd one, but a lot of them are tied up.
Yeah, the Caribou is crowded. It really, I've looked around on the MTO, on the placer claim side and the mineral claim side, and it's chock-a-block full. Call them nuisance stakers, whatever you want. There's a whole bunch of people who have an interest and have been watching and waiting. And if it's a rising tide lifting all boats, right, you want to have some exposure to that somehow. And again, very unique position that you have here.
We had a couple of claims that we had our eyes on, and we knew when they were going to expire, and they were right contiguous to our group, and we thought, hey, this is great. Let's see if we can grab these things. And it was a fastest fingers competition, and they got plucked by some guy who I think was probably closer to the main office in Victoria, and we're on a computer in Quesnel, and I think the fastest fingers competition, I think we had a disadvantage, maybe, I don't know. It's sort of like a high frequency trader, but yeah, we missed out on them, and we jumped on it as soon as we were able to. So the good claims go pretty quickly if they come up. So then you're in a situation where you have to try to buy them, and it's a weird market for buying claims. I mean, I've had guys try to sell me worse than moose pasture for $600,000.
Yeah, some of the prices.
And some of the stuff, you've got to have somebody who really knows the ground out there. I know the area well enough now, and I'm by no means an expert on that end. I employ people who are, and trust them. But we had one that was pitched at me, and when the pitch came in, I said, "Isn't that up where the caribou habitat is?" And he said, "Oh no, it's nowhere near the caribou habitat." And I thought, okay. Well, so I called our agent at the time, and I got her to check. And the area he was going to sell to us was only accessible by helicopter. There were no roads into it. It was caribou habitat, most of it, and the portion that wasn't was pretty much right up the side of a mountain. So it was none of it, I don't think, would have been mineable. So,
Well, it's good to have you with your career as a broker in the junior mining business, right? And having seen all these good, bad, and ugly juniors along the years to give you a sense for what's possible.
I thought I had seen every sick dog and pony show. I I was not aware of how slick some of these guys were until I got out to Barkerville.
Private
It
markets are
is,
a whole other world, right? It's wild.
yeah. And no, there's some characters out there. It's a very colorful place.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and
So
kudos to you. There's a report. IBK Capital Corp has an analyst report on Green River, and there's mention of $1 million exploration program, right? And it talks about a backpack drilling program, a
yes,
component of work. And so, just to mention that briefly, leading up to a more bigger diamond drilling program for the lode gold hard rock exploration programs, just to point out the backpack drilling idea and the fact that you guys are aware of that, it's on your radar, an example of doing things for lower cost that is, it's really just best practices, to start simply and do some of this surface testing work if you're chasing something that outcrops.
yeah, and we've got an idea what's there. There's been a lot of work done on that property. We spent quite a bit of time summarizing all of the work that had been done on the property, and Kyle was just buried in paper going through it. There's some interesting things on that property for sure, and not just gold. I won't get into all of it, but there's a few other things on there that are of interest. But we're primarily after gold, and we've already got a pretty good idea where we'd probably focus. But yeah, it's we're going to be doing some testing. We're not just going to go in there and willy-nilly and start poking holes in it. So we'll take our time. The $1 million program, like I mentioned, it's a tough market to raise money in. So we may end up scaling that back and doing a little less this year, which in some ways might not be a bad thing because it would avoid some dilution that I don't think we really have to do. I think we might be better off to scale it back from our original plan and have a time to analyze the results and go at it hard next year. So we'll see. Right now, the placer stuff is really keeping us quite busy, but I'm excited to get at that, and we'll see whether we have to scale the program back a little bit. We have sort of a contingency plan if that happens. We figure out what we could cut out, what we could scale back.
Well, and there's the potential to produce some high-grade gold as headline news from that work program, right? And the placer mining, as a landlord, you're never really going to have those surprising headlines of windfall cash payments or high-grade gold exploration results from the placer side, right? So
it really just keeps us in the game and keeps us close to everything. But our exploration people, our geological people are all local. We are looking at a wonderful geologist that we're trying to drag onto our board here next little bit. He was the first guy I thought of when I originally set up the company, and I think he's finally got his plate cleared enough that he's thinking of coming on with us. So that will be absolutely huge. But that'd probably be the only geological person that isn't somebody local. So it's really nice to have a head office that's only 60 kilometers from where your major properties are. That's a much easier commute than the one I made from the West End to downtown Edmonton every day for 25 years.
Yeah. Well, and whether you're scaling back whatever the financing comes in at, right? That will be right. Literally the fourth financing since going public here.
Yeah, it was kind of an interesting process how we ended up going public. There was a shell company. We knew the guys behind it, and it was one of many things that they do. And that company had been repurposed twice already. It had two different names. Had been around since 2006, and It was sitting on about $1.3 million worth of tax pools. So it's tax losses and Canadian exploration expenses. And what we managed to do was get the debt settled in exchange for a few shares and put the thing back on the road, and we renamed it. So we actually took over. I say we, the current management took over in May of 17. Had it all restructured and everything ready to go in May of 17. Really? And then it was September of 17 when we had an annual meeting and officially changed the name of the company to Green River Gold Corp. So yeah, we've been at this for a little bit.
Wow.
But the public company idea really came from getting out there, doing the placer mining, and being extremely frustrated with the lack of services. And I thought, there's an angle here for a public company. And I wasn't sure, even when we got it going, exactly how we were going to work it. But in the back of my mind, I was thinking, we've got to find a way to make it possible for people to do placer mining, and they don't have enough capital, and we didn't want to be a lender to placer miners directly. So I thought, well, why don't we pick up the properties and do the bonding, and at least that chops down some of the cost. And if they need a trommel, for that matter, there's a private company that we have there that could sell them a Green River Gold trommel, and we have a leasing company that is not us. Believe me, we don't do leasing, but we have a leasing company that's quite happy with their product and would lease it out to them over a 5-year term as well. So there's some of your big costs that are turned into nice monthly payments rather than having to come up with all that cash up front. So it makes it easier for people to get into the business, and again, we know what that learning curve is like because I went up it, and it's steep and it's costly, and so.
And the 25 million shares out for CCR, I wonder It's
actually about 28 million now with that first round of the financing closed. Yeah.
Okay, good. So I wonder that shareholder base and this concept and this, direction for the plan right. And is the base on board?
Yeah, most definitely. We don't trade a lot, and that is because of the cost base most people have on their shares. We don't find many guys want to sell at the 6-cent range where it's been sitting. So there's very little activity. I'm sure some of our guys would probably sell when it goes above that, and we get more trading volume at higher prices. But right now there's very little activity, and that's simply because we've got a very loyal shareholder base. I speak to most of these people on a regular basis. Nobody owns more than 10% of the company, but a lot of the shareholders are people that I've known for a long time, friends, a little bit of family, but not much. But really a close people that I'm close to are the vast majority of the shareholders, and so I could probably tell you where 80 or 90% of the stock is, and they're not in any hurry to sell at this price range. So they seem to be on board with what we're doing.
Okay. Yeah, I'll suggest, just to say a rights offering. I know they're not as common in Canada for juniors. Apparently the compliance costs are, prohibitive in some cases, but, just to mention that, and the existing shareholder exemption too, right? If you have some contingents there of people who are, not accredited, but like what you're doing and want to have some ability to put money into the treasury, right? So that it's not just buying shares in the market, but, really putting the money to work in the business.
Yeah, and we think we're going to be able to raise the money here. We've got some ideas that should keep us trading at a pretty good range. We've actually been sitting at that 6-cent range for about a month and a half. We were up to 7 or 8 cents, I think, for a little bit on very light volume. And I think we only traded down below 6 on like 1 or 2 trades. So it seems to like that level and doesn't want to drop below it. But we get a little more excitement out there, get the bids up a little higher. I think you'll see some trading volume starting to happen, and I would be happy to see that. But in a way, it's a good sign that nobody wants to sell at this price. So, like I said, it's a pretty loyal bunch.
Yeah. Well, and the street is kind of looks at you like, what do we do with this? And for this shell company valuation at a, sub 2 million, it's, what do the brokers, what does, a lot of the street doesn't have a lot that it can really do with you. You're not raising, there's not a lot of fees coming from financings, non-brokered placements, right? It's,
Exactly, and my last while in the in the brokerage business, I was with one of the independent firms. I wasn't with the bank firm, and you would think that those would be the guys that would still be doing the junior mining finance and whatever. And the whole industry has moved away from it to such an extent that it's tough for any mining company, I think, to raise money at this point, especially the juniors. So we're kind of stuck with this for a little bit longer, and that's why I want to get us as quickly as possible to where we have a sustainable cash flow and we're not coming back to market all the time. We do have the offering we're doing is a 6 cents with a 10-cent 2-year warrant, a half warrant, and I'm hopeful that those warrants will all get exercised and get some extra cash coming in, so I'm not back out there banging on doors again, any sooner than I need to be. But
well,
I think
junior miners are always raising money, right?
It's true. We're trying to be a little different than that. We'd like to find a way to generate enough cash flow that we're really more of a self-sustaining thing. So it's we're working two roads at the same time, really, and we have like I said, we're a lottery ticket. We're hopefully at least win the $10 ticket, $10 prize. So that's a little different. It's not quite an all or none shot. And we think there's other opportunities in the gold mining. There's other areas, I think, that can be explored, that could be profitable, and it's a good fit. We'd like to be a one-stop gold shop where people really don't need to go anywhere else for the placer end of it.
Big dreams. This is important, right? And another thing it's important is, raising money in one place and spending it in another place. Generally, raising money in a high cost environment and spending it in a low cost environment, so you kind of get more bang for your buck. And that's the case in Quesnel. You talk about the rents and stuff and how far money goes just on commercial real estate and just running your operations there, compared to doing it in Edmonton or somewhere else, right? It's a big differential.
Our office and retail space is right on the main drag, right on the ground floor, and right on the highway, and it's $1,100 a month, including utilities.
Can you imagine?
So it doesn't take us a whole lot of sales out of that store to cover off all of our office expenses for the year. Sorry about that. Or for the month, rather. And as I said, that store is surprisingly doing much more than we thought it would. And we're just getting around.
And the same concept about, spending money in a cheaper place, raising money in an expensive place and spending it in a cheaper place. Same kind of concept kind of applies to the financing as well. You talk about how hard it is for the placer miners to raise money, right, as a private entity with no, real basis for what to expect in the future, right, and how hard the challenges that come along with their financing, and even taking little things like the permitting and just organizational stuff off their back. Would be the landlord position there that you have carved out. That's a twist on that same idea, right? Because raising money in the public markets is hard, but it's easier than raising money privately to try and do some placer operations, right?
Especially, even locally out there. I mean, if a business has got to lend money to a placer miner, they've been burned so many times, and they're extremely careful as soon as somebody says they're a miner. So we've got ours pretty much secured. We're not going to have to worry too much. The contract we'll have in place for them to sign is something that protects the company's interests, And
Wow.
and once that's done, I mean, we want to see them succeed. We want people to succeed, and we've got excellent people that have got lots of experience, and we can give people a bit of guidance as well. Although most miners, I have to tell you, they all know how to do it. Everybody is an expert, so it's there's not too many that take kindly to advice. They all figure they've got it down pat. So it's an interesting business that way.
Well, that may
Everybody's an
change,
expert.
right? That
Yeah.
may change with the rising gold price and falling costs. There may be a new wave of people coming in, and you may find, they bring some new ideas and they're open to new arrangements. And there may be a whole bunch more business, for this model that you're advancing there in the next 5 years versus prior, right? And
I
a whole
think
bunch of
there's got to
stuff
be
comes
a
along.
huge amount more business. I do see a renewed interest in placer mining, and I think it's something that will present greater opportunities to us going forward. So
There's
we've got multiple ideas. We come up with different stuff almost every week, but we're trying to remain focused on the execution of what we're doing now.
That's the key, right? And there's a classic line from a pundit out there named Ian Castle who looks at micro cap stocks, and he talks about how, if you really want to get outperformance in your returns, you should go and find an area that's really inefficient and just focus on being an expert in that, right?
Yeah.
And junior mining stocks are like that. They're a pretty illiquid, inefficient market, a lot of weird things going on. But placer mining is even that, to a greater degree, I think. And, the lack of competition that you have at present, right? Some people may say, oh, it's, if other people, if it was such a good idea, why isn't somebody else doing it, right? It's like, well, hold on here. This is
Yeah.
high risk investing, and we're here for discovery and exploration, and whether that's, discovering a new business line and a whole new model that works, right? Or
Yeah.
discovering an ore body. Bring it on.
I wouldn't be surprised if somebody else comes in and tries to do it, and competition will only make us sharper. There's an awful lot of ground out there. I mean, we've got 20 square kilometers of placer claims at this point,
Yes.
and we'll be able to permit quite a few of those ones that are attractive that people may want to come in and see. And if somebody wants to make us an offer and buy them, of course, we're open to selling anything at a profit. I had a personal experience with a claim that we had that we picked up for $25,000. We cleared the trees off of it, and we did some mining on it, and it wasn't really what we wanted. It wasn't as big as we thought, and we ended up selling that for a very substantial profit. And if the demand increases for these claims, the way I think it will, if we could put the lipstick and eyeshadow on them, and I mean important lipstick and eyeshadow, which is permitting and bonding, it's kind of like I don't want to call it home flipping, but we can add a lot of value to them. A lot of people don't want to buy a fixer upper; they want
The
the job already
generator,
done.
and it's kind of like the generative exploration side of things too, which is well known, popular niche for certain exploration investors who they don't want a one shot, they want the house, they want to bet with the house, and of course, right? So
Yeah. So we think there's multiple ways to add value to these claims as we go along.
And I saw that you bought some of them in for shares recently too. So I'm glad to see that deal happen. Is that kind of a template, do we think, going forward, buying equipment for cash and placer claims for shares?
Yeah, right now, with cash being a difficult thing to raise, we like the idea of picking up claims in exchange for shares. And it also tells us something about the people that we're buying from. If they really believe in their claim and they know it's going to be part of this company, once we explain the concept to them, a lot of them are willing to take the shares for a good part of it. And it saves us having to go out there and issue more money to come up with cash. Some of them are just like cash. I know that. It's interesting though when you're out there looking for claims as a private company, and we did quite a bit of that before we started looking for claims as a public company. So we'd already been at this for a while. I was always a little leery of the guys who didn't want to take back a royalty or stay involved as a joint venture partner. You know, say no, we just want the cash. You know, that's it. You know, and there's always a reason why they had to sell this great claim. You know, my wife needs an operation, or you know,
it's too much ground. I've got too much ground, Perry. I can't handle it. I tell you.
Yeah, exactly. I just want to see this mine before I die. You know. And,
my favorite. Yeah.
Yeah, and one of my other favorites, and you hear this one all the time, is that, well, I had a guy in here mining it for me there last year, and I heard stories that got all kinds of gold out of it, and I never saw a penny of it. So, you know, it's just, I just get a kick out of that. But it's the same stories all the time. And you get a little tired of them, but it is kind of comical when you can finish the sentences for the guy who's trying to sell you the property. So I like people that are willing to maintain a stake in it. That's what we loved about the deal that we did up at Fontaine, was that the fellow, we know him very well, the guy that sold it to us, and he'll help us out with drilling. As I said, he was an ex-driller for Barkerville, but he knows that area very, very well, and he wanted to stay involved, especially on the hard rock part of it. So, you know, he carried that claim along on his own for quite a while, so he was quite thrilled to take a bunch of shares, you know, and some cash, and stay involved with the company. That to me is a good sign.
Any
lockups on his property? Any
lockups on those for him?
No, just the standard 4 months on it. So we're not worried. Like I said, we've got enough loyal shareholders that it never seems to get beat down below about 5.5 cents, and I think it traded some at 5 here just recently, but it never stays there, and it always comes back up into that 6 cent range. And we gotta burst through that 6. We're a heck of a steal at 6 cents.
Well,
we got a market cap less than $2 million. We've got well over 300,000, probably 350 of equipment and inventory. We've got the little retail business, which basically offsets all of our admin costs. As a matter of fact, our admin person, we split, and she's wonderful, we split her cost between the private company, because she does the admin for the private company as well as the public company. So her costs are split 50-50. And she's working the retail as well. So, you know, we basically will be able to cover off the Green River portion of her salary, probably just from the retail profits. And that's our admin person, so we got that covered. And Kyle, who's our Mr. Everything, mine manager, store manager, for what it's worth, our other person pretty much manages the store. He also keeps an eye on the shop for the private co. So he's technically an employee of our private company, and we bill him to Green River Gold at his cost plus 15% just to cover the EI CPP, WorkSafe BC, on it. And we only charge Green River Gold for the hours he actually spends on Green River Gold business. So we have an excellent full-time guy with all the skills you could ever want in what we're doing. Really honest guy. Ran for city council the last time around. He's in his 30s. He's a pretty sharp young guy, and we've got him pretty much on call for Green River Gold without having to pay his full-time salary all year.
Pretty good.
So, you know,
and the overhead and the corporate G&A burn for Green River, you know, like with you in Edmonton, you know, we're not paying Bay Street rent.
No, we're certainly not. I work mostly from my home office here. We do have an official office. Our CFO maintains an office over there in the other part of Edmonton, but I rarely go to it. But if we need to meet people, we do have a spot we can do it. We've basically, when I go out to Quesnel, there's a little tiny apartment, very cheap little tiny apartment that I use as my spot when I go out there, and that's actually the private company that covers that off. So Green River doesn't even pay for that at this point. May have to change that at some point. we've got, yeah, our overhead's low. Our overhead is really, really low. As a matter of fact, we're going to probably start taking a salary here at some point because the CFO and myself have been knocking ourselves out on this thing for years, and we haven't, other than I think it was the summer of 2017 when I think we had gone through about a month without sleep, and he said, "I think I should get paid for this." So, we paid him $4,000 and me $6,000, and that was in the summer of 2017. That's all we've been paid so far. So we've been basically doing this without any management salary.
Are there accruing payables there that are going to some position or just?
We haven't even done that. So we haven't even given ourselves any stock options yet, although that will probably change soon. So this has been we're working for the shareholders, trying to create value. I figured once we get the business model established, which I believe it is now, then we'll start getting a paycheck out of here. But the idea was get the business founded first rather than bleeding cash out of it every month when it wasn't really more than a concept. And now the concept is actually starting to come to fruition. We'll probably start getting paid, but I think it says something about our commitment to this thing, that the success of the company came first before our wages.
And your years of experience investing in juniors and watching the money just get frittered away and wondering how people can make those kinds of decisions as fiduciaries or executives.
It boggles the mind sometimes, but I mean, I work at this thing full tilt every day, and I'm absolutely loving it. It's just it's such an adventure compared to what I was doing for 25 years. I loved being a stockbroker for most of that time, but toward the end, the industry basically took away any ability to be entrepreneurial. They didn't want you doing any juniors. I always had a combination of managed money and some junior stocks. It's funny, people with $1 million portfolios, they'd call in. The only thing they wanted to talk about was the 25,000 they had in the junior stock. They didn't want to talk about the other stuff. It was entertainment for them. Yeah. And actually, we made some pretty good dollars on some of those things.
You can do, absolutely. Yeah. Yes, indeed.
So we were careful. I always liked, and I think I modeled it after, but I always loved a company that had existing production and blue sky potential in the background. And if you're familiar with the company, it was called Claude Resources out of Saskatchewan. We traded that thing for about 25 years. It was a gold mine up near La Ronge in northern Saskatchewan. And it would fall into hard times. They'd have a couple of bad quarters, and rumors would start flying that they weren't going to make it and everything else. And I'd look at the balance sheet, and it wasn't that bad, and they could always issue some shares. And we would buy back in when everybody hated it, and it'd go from penny status to $2, and then we'd sell it off and it'd fall back down again. I think we must have traded them 5 times. Finally, they ended up sold out to Silver Standard Resources, which is now SSR Mining, and the mine's doing very well. But when we looked at that, people say, "Why do you like that company so much?" And I said, because they've got this Santoy area that looks like it could be really good. And it's sitting there just beyond their financial grasp, it seemed, for a long time. They couldn't get enough money together to really exploit it. But that was their blue sky potential to me. And in the meantime, they had cash flow coming in. And they struggled from time to time, but I love that business model. It was the same thing with junior oils. I like guys that had a steady Eddie sort of cash flow coming in, and then they had a couple of big targets that could be game changers for them. And that's what I tried to model this after. So we're excited as heck about that hard rock mineral property. But the idea is to have a sustainable business apart from that. Yeah. And I think that is something that will set us apart from most junior explorers. So
amazing to think of that with your sub 2 million market cap, right? It's nice that you have it the way, right? Like it's nice that it's not 20 million at this point. because
it blows me away that we're still sitting at this price. But we just really started telling this story a short while ago. Something I learned as a broker was if you're going to go into a boardroom, you'd better have your story ready to tell, because the brokers have seen every dog and pony show, and they're going to ask you the tough questions. And if you haven't got full answers for those, you're going to get nicely dismissed from the place, and they'll shake your hand, but you'll never get back in there again. And so you've pretty much got to have the story really ready to be told. And so I didn't waste a lot of time doing promotion while we were building it. We focused on building it, and now that we're actually rolling out the business model, and we've got so many components already clicking, now it's time to start telling the story. So one reason we're sitting down here in this low market cap is me putting my head down and focusing on operations and execution rather than promotion. Now we're starting to spend a little more time doing some promotion, and it's starting to click. I think people are starting to catch on, and once they understand the model, I think it'll go places. I wish I could give better forward guidance at this point on what we're doing, but once we get a few deals signed, then we'll have a bit of an idea what's going on. But this year's a start. Next year we hope to have a lot more permitted properties, and if I'm right on the gold mining thing and the enthusiasm we're seeing for it, there'll be a lot of take up on those properties next year. And so it is, to my mind, is very scalable. We'd also like to pick up some properties down south that have a longer mining season, and it's something I mean farther south in BC rather than I'm not talking about crossing the border. We got enough issues to deal with figuring out our own regulations here, but I'd like to get something that's got a longer mining season as well.
Smart.
And Smart. We're looking to diversify a little bit that way. Not too thrilled about going to the Yukon.
No, no.
We'll stick with one jurisdiction to begin with, and try to build the model there. And
I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me about it, because for all the time that I spend looking at Omanika and even Claude Resources, shout out Chris Temple there, and all the stuff, the Eagle Plains group, right, that traces back to Omanika, just all the history of kind of Western Canadian exploration group, well represented in a lot of these stories, right? And for me, for all the time I spend, thinking about this stuff in the Caribou and what you're doing, it's still taken me a while. I think the basics are pretty clear, but it's a different story. I haven't, right? It's still taking me some time to learn and get it straight in my head. What is the driver? What to expect next in terms of major news? What would count as a really good surprise for CCR?
Right now, it's kind of a steady as she goes. I think what you'll probably see from us over the next little while, at least we're working diligently at it, are some further acquisitions of claims. We are always looking for claims. We've got a giant funnel that we funnel them into, and we sort of work them down and get down to the ones that we really care about. But we spend a lot of time digging, trying to find the good placer claims, and we've got a few that we got our eyes on now. So you may see, our business plan involves bringing in a lot more property and then starting to do some exploration work on it, and we'll be able to do some drilling, maybe some trenching on some of our own placer properties, and let some results out from that. So there's a little bit of that that'll be happening, but we'll also
conference locked.
Oh,
sorry.
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened there. Anyway, we should hopefully have some announcements here in short order on arrangements with miners coming in to mine the properties and show that our model does have value and it is real. We're pretty close with a few deals now, but nothing's been signed and delivered. But we're talking to enough people, and I'm quite certain we'll have some miners on our property this season.
And with those ones, you may not be able to provide much guidance, but pretty prompt disclosure of cash flow would be fair game, I'd think.
Yeah, we'll see exactly how we publicize this thing. Really, this year is more about proof of concept than a massive cash flow. We want to make sure we get it right, that we get the kinks out of it, and we see where the issues may be as we roll out the model. I'd rather do a few properties with people that we've sort of vetted and trust, and get it right than try to do 10 of them and not be able to keep track of what's going on.
Thank you. Once again, all of your experience watching the markets, and it comes to be very valuable. And this is your first time as CEO of a public company, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It's I've been in some roles where I've done a lot of leadership. I've been on boards of directors and whatever, so leading people, and I've always had employees working under me, even as a stockbroker. I've been in sales management and whatever, so it's not a big leap for me to step into a leadership role like this. And the background, the training, it's funny. I think I accidentally trained for this. I've always loved talking to people, so the public relations part of it has always been very easy to me. Understanding the public markets from the broker's side was a great thing. I was an auditor, so I understand how auditors think. I worked for about 9 years in the public accounting field before I went into investments, and I was surprised how quickly it came back to me. The first time I had to do our quarterly interim financial statements and management discussion and analysis, our CFO was a chartered accountant, but I basically did that myself, and then he went through and corrected the errors that I had in there. But speaking with auditors, speaking with lawyers, regulators, if we have to. Hopefully we don't have to talk to regulators very often, but those things are all second nature to me. So every aspect of the management end of the business is stuff that I've trained for and I've got the background in. So that part of it's good. Geology, I'm learning as I go. But as I said, we've got very good people that we have in that field. And the mining stuff, I've spent enough time mining to realize that I'm probably not somebody who wants to spend a lot of time mining. But it's I had to be on the site. I had to understand, what goes where and how big a machine will dig those holes and what kind of trommel can run what kind of capacity. And figure out some of the regulations and the rules around mining. There's nothing like actually getting your hands dirty to do that. So I've got. I think most CEOs that are good are generalists. And I consider myself that. I think I can cover any aspect of the job. And with a small company, you pretty much have to.
Yeah. Glad to see not a geologist with a checkbook here. But it's
yeah,
and the promotional side of it too. Just to I think you understand. Understanding how markets, a career watching markets in the junior space. I think you understand that pretty well. Is there? Do you see a high profile promotional story here at some point? On the other side of some demonstrated cash flow.
I do. As I said, we've just started rolling this out now in terms of promotion. We'll get better at it as we go. But I've spent the better part of my life convincing people to do things with their money, talking them into buying stuff that they sometimes may not have been comfortable with. But I said, look, this thing is cheap, relative to its cash flow and its earnings, and you should get your money in here. And a lot of cases, I was buying stuff that weren't in the hot sectors. I always liked finding cheap stuff. And then you had to twist people's arms to buy it when it was cheap, and then they wanted to hold on to it when it was expensive. So getting people to invest money in a good project that I believe in is something I've been pretty good at over the years. So this project will only get better as we prove out the concept. And like I said, there might be some hidden surprises and other things we can drag into this company as well. And then we've always got our lottery ticket. were very deliberate on the claims that we staked. If you look at that project, I mean, it looks like it looks like a Rorschach test or something. The claims that we staked, we could have just grabbed a big square block of stuff, and we were very careful to pick up areas where there'd been work done and there were promising results from earlier miners or whatever. So there's some interesting stuff we found we didn't even know was on there. It was I won't talk about all of it for competitive reasons, but yeah.
And news flow before you know it, right? That's a big position there, Eureka Thrust. And if Omanika lights the world on fire with some stuff at Wingdam, you know, you're blocking up against them, and you're also up against Osisko. So, you know, two great neighbors to be able to talk about.
We really do, and I've known Tom McNeil from Omanika and 49 North, and Andy Davidson and Jeff over there at 49 North. I've been in their office in Saskatchewan. I've known them for years, so that's pretty good. I know the Eagle Plains guys who were managing that project, Chuck Downey and Tim Termundi as well. So. This is it's great to have them as neighbors, right? It's not really a coincidence because it was their project that got me excited about coming to the Cariboo to placer mining. But the fact we end up with property immediately adjacent to them, that is pretty funny because there's a lot of ground out there, and to end up with the same, actually, touchy-feely, we're right up against them. So I love where we sit there between those two companies, and there'll be a lot of activity through Omanika, I believe, and I can't imagine Osisko's going to sit on their hands after spending that much money to buy that Barkerville property, and I think it'll advance much more quickly with Osisko's resources behind it than it was able to with Barkerville's, I hate to say it, limited financial capacity, right? You can only move so quick.
And it's just the size of the land package that they have too is just mind-boggling, really, and it's but you guys as a junior, the potential to even you have a pretty large land package there, right? You could kind of get lost doing early stage work here or there and produce a bunch of exploration results that maybe the market doesn't care about. But I think you understand the impact of some, as you talked about, lottery ticket, right? If you can get some high grade gold results in headline news,
we're in a fabulous location. We love the geology where we are, and if you look at that huge land package that Barkerville or Osisko now has, and look at where I think I sent you a map of what the area looked like before Omanika picked up the extra acreage, and that one has a bunch of red dots on it, which are all the min files that have been published, and all the red dots on Osisko's property are not that far away from the red dots on our property, where people have done earlier exploration work and filed reports and whatever on it. So they have a huge block of property, but most of the activity is down toward the end where we are. So, yeah. So
thanks again for taking all the time to talk with me through it all here. If anybody's stuck with us for going on an hour and a half, 2 hour conversation here, thanks all to the audience as well. And maybe just pass along your contact information there.
Sure. We are, our website's a great place to start. It's greenrivergold.ca. If you're interested in placer mining, there's a link to our store on there as well. It kind of tells you who we are and what we're about. My direct number, you can catch me at 780-993-2193. And my email address is perry.little, that's Perry, .little, just like small, at greenrivergold.ca. And again, if you just go to that website, all the contact details are on there as well.
Perry, thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter.
Goodbye.
Bye.